There's an ongoing security situation in Brussels, Belgium this morning. The latest numbers, 36 dead, 100 wounded. Joining us now on the phone is Democratic presidential candidate and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Madam Secretary, thank you for joining us. Are we doing enough to combat ISIS in Europe?
Well, we have to do more, obviously, with a terrible attack like this. It is just a continuing reminder of how sophisticated these terrorists are. You know, I've been calling for closer cooperation, looking at all of our laws and rules to determine what works and what doesn't against such a determined enemy. We've got to keep increasing pressure on them in the region, and we have to dismantle their network of funding, of arms, recruiting, and propaganda, and strengthen our defenses at home, and that requires close cooperation with our European allies, particularly through NATO, which remains an indispensable alliance for us as we try to figure out how to prevent attacks and, you know, round up those who are in any way involved in them.
Madam Secretary, this morning we had Mike Morell on. He's our senior security contributor and a former deputy director of the CIA. He said Paris, San Bernardino, and now Brussels. The terrorists are winning at this point. Is he right?
Well, I have the highest regard for Mike. I worked closely with him when I was Secretary of State. They are certainly showing they can wage attacks. But remember, the primary goal of terrorists is to terrorize, to intimidate, to force people to undermine the democratic values that are the foundation of our alliance, our way of life. And we can't panic in the face of these things. We need to be strong, smart, and steady in how we respond. Certainly, we have to tighten up our security. I've talked about that, our visa system, our passenger name record system. And, you know, when I was Secretary of State, we had problems with Europe agreeing to do that. They kind of thought this was an American problem. Well, after Paris and now the horrible attack in Brussels, they see, as we did see, that this is a global problem, and it's particularly one directed at Europe and the United States. So we've got to tighten things up, and we've got to, you know, be really smart about how we get ahead of the terrorist threats, and that's going to require closer cooperation with Europe, and it's going to require Europe to change some of their law enforcement and intelligence practices.
But you've often said, Secretary Clinton, that it's not enough to contain ISIS. You have to defeat ISIS. I'm wondering what your definition of defeat is in this case, and do you think Europe has a handle on what's happening there?
Well, my definition of defeat is to drive them from the territory that they currently occupy in Syria and Iraq, which will enable us to limit their effectiveness. Also, we've got to go after foreign fighters, foreign funding, the arms that they receive, and we've got to take them on in the internet space where they're quite effective at recruiting and propagandizing. And, of course, we've got to do everything we can here at home to keep us safe. I think that Europe is quickly moving toward more effective procedures, but there's still a lot of challenges they face when it comes to law enforcement and intelligence that they're going to have to, you know, overcome if they expect to be able to keep Europe safe and to be an effective partner with us going forward.
Secretary Clinton, what are the questions that U.S. officials are asking at this moment?
I think, first of all, what could have been done to predict this, particularly after the arrest of Salah Abdel Salam, the remaining perpetrator of the Paris attacks, when he was arrested 4 days ago? Should there have been a more immediate focus on what might be retaliation for that arrest? Whether this was that or whether it had been planned and he knew of it, we don't know yet. I think that Europe, and particularly Belgium, has to take a hard look at the rules they operate under. I'm told that they can't make evening or nighttime raids. Well, that doesn't add up. If you're going after terrorists, you've got to have a much freer hand to go after them based on the information that you have. There's a long list of what I think have to be the after-attack analysis that the United States and the Europeans have to engage in together. But it does go to show how important these alliances are. You know, we can't walk away from Europe. We can't walk away from NATO. We've got to really toughen and intensify our cooperation, and we have to be prepared to take the smart and steady steps that are going to keep us safe and help keep our friends safe.
Secretary, on that point, when you heard the Republican frontrunner Donald Trump say yesterday that we should consider withdrawing from NATO, what was your reaction?
Oh, you know, to that, as with so many of the things he says, it is just out of any historic context. It doesn't even understand the modern threats that we face and how important our alliance is and how essential NATO is to our cooperation. I know that we have to be, fully engaged with Europe. NATO is the most effective defense alliance ever, and it always needs to be updated, modernized, and particularly because of the threat posed by terrorism. But it would be a grievous error for the United States to advocate ending the NATO alliance and, in effect, pulling out of Europe when we see how what happens in Europe has a boomerang effect on us and vice versa.
This happened at a time where Belgium was in a high state of alert, and this still happened. Here in the United States, they say there are no credible threats at this particular time. What do you say to Americans who are, quite frankly, very nervous this morning?
Well, that I understand. Anybody waking up and seeing what we are seeing on the TV is nervous and even scared because this terrorist threat seems to come almost out of nowhere, time after time. And we have to be incredibly focused on preventing attacks and preventing the kind of planning that goes into them. I think when you say that Belgium was on high alert, their definition of high alert is perhaps not as high as it needs to be. Some of their legal restraints and law enforcement practices, not for any fault of the people actually trying to prevent attacks, but their legal framework needs updating, as it does in much of Europe. When I was Secretary of State,
all right, Secretary Clinton.
Continuing challenges. Okay.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. We thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.